Love is a very ephemeral thing. Maybe you're not even using a conscious strategy. You are just being who you are, which is ultimately the most charming quality of all. Humans don't like to admit that they're inferior, that somebody has something that they wish they had. So we justify it to ourselves. We say, they're really a bad person. They're evil. They're inconsiderate. They're all full of themselves. They're arrogant. It's actually stemming from us. It's stemming from the fact that we wish we had what they had. We feel envy. The main fault I see in reading the news and in dealing with people is they don't think long term. When you get older, the thoughts come quicker and quicker and quicker. Now it's not like a whole minute. Now it's like less than a second. One new thought, another image, another memory, blah, 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 really spinning faster and faster and faster. As that goes through your mind, time seems to speed up. Before I had my stroke, I wrote 7 books, and I would get those moments, and what I would do was I had to get out of my mind, and I would go take a hike up into the park, and all these great ideas would come to me. Or I would go for a long swim because I was into long distance swimming, and then I'd come out of the pool and wow, my mind was just sparkling with ideas. I can't do any of it now. I can't hike, I can't swim, I can't do the things that got me out of my mind and my body. And I'm writing a book that has to be exciting, that has to excite the reader every single page, every word. I can't write a dull book about the sublime. So what I do is I have to work on my head. And so I'm sitting there writing this thing and it's not coming out right. I have to step back and I have to put myself in the mood and I have to go, this is an incredible privilege you have, Robert, to write this book. Let's get into the spirit of it. Let's feel what you're trying to write. Let's not be intellectual. Let's not write something. Let's feel it first and then write it. I have to go through a process. I have to listen to some music. I have to look at my cat who's walking by. I have to talk to just look at my wife or see something. And then I feel it and then I can write it. But it is difficult because all of those things that I depended on before, I don't have. So just like I said, when life turns against you, you have to adapt, you have to learn. It brings the best out of you sometimes because we're in a rut. Things are so familiar, we don't work on ourselves. But when things turn bad, like they turned bad for me, you have to change, you have to adapt, you have to become a different person. And it makes you grow and it makes you learn, which is what I've had to do. I have to force myself to be inspired, literally. You know how some people are good seducers, and it could be not just for sex, it could be socially or politically. They're very calm. They know how to tell a good story. They have charisma. They have energy. Their face lights up. They know how to say the right things, and they attract you. Okay, but there are people who do the opposite. They say the wrong things. They do the wrong things. They dress the wrong way. They take you to the wrong places. They repel you. They are anti-seductive. Nobody wants to be around them, right? And so what are the qualities that make a person anti-seductive? So one of them are people who talk too much, who are always bragging, who always have a story to tell. In the realm of seduction, women often complain of men who explain. They explain everything. They explain exactly what you're doing, what you mean, right? They call it mansplaining. Okay, so people who tell you everything, who are doing 95% of the talking, and they don't think they are, they're extremely anti-seductive. People who moralize, who tell you you're wrong, this is what you need to do, this is what's good, this is what's bad, that's anti-seductive, right? They preach to you. People who are always bragging about themselves like they're so great, that's a very anti-seductive quality. I think being vulgar is an anti-seductive quality because it's like you have no self-control. You don't look at yourself and realize that what you're saying or how you're dressing or how you're looking is actually kind of off-putting, right? So a seductive person is self-aware. They're self-aware of their body language, of the clothes that they wear, of how they talk. The anti-seductive person has no self-awareness. They enter life, they don't look in a mirror, they don't think about what they're saying, they just think they're being natural, and they offend a lot of people. I look around me, and I think the main fault I see in reading the news and in dealing with people is they don't think long-term. They're just reacting in the moment. And in the book, I wrote a book about strategy, my version of the art of war, called The 33 Strategies of War. And I call this tactical hell, as opposed to being strategic in life. Tactical hell is you're continually just reacting to what other people are doing. If you can lift your head out of the moment and think a few steps ahead and think, what is it that will actually bring me success? Not just immediately against this person, but 3 or 4 steps down the road. Elevate your mind above the battlefield and think ahead and game it out. And sometimes what you think is going to work immediately is actually the worst thing you can do. I take a political example right now that's in the news, and it had to do with the recent possible shutdown of the government. And Chuck Schumer, as we all know, eventually folded, and he agreed not to shut it down, and he voted for the budget. And he said that the shutdown would have been the worst thing that could have happened. Okay? But in strategic thinking, which is something that I study very deeply, that was definitely the wrong move to make. It was reacting. It was being tactical and not being strategic. When you have leverage in a situation, in any situation in life, you have to use your leverage. And what a lot of people do, they're afraid of the leverage that they have. They're afraid they're going to offend the other person. They're afraid they're going to go too far, and they kind of compromise, and they don't use what they actually have. And what that signals is, you're weak, we can play you, and the next time around, we're going to negotiate the hell out of you. We're going to beat you, okay? You have to signal to people sometimes that you're going to use your leverage, that even if it means something bad is going to happen, like a shutdown, I'm signaling to you that I'm not weak, that the next time around you have to negotiate with me. That's long-term thinking. That's getting out of the immediate reaction and going, the bigger game is long-term, right? And there's going to be more and more situations where you're going to be conflicting. You want to signal to them that you're not a pushover, that you can resist them, that there's something else going on. Children are by nature very seductive because they're not trying to put on a front. They just are who they are, right? And they're very fresh, and they say what they think, and they have weird fantasies, and they're charming, and we're charmed by them, right? And so when a person retains that quality, retains that openness, retains that kind of spontaneity, retains that kind of unpretentiousness, we're charmed as well, and we can be seduced by them. And one of the types, in the book I have 9 types of seducers, and I'm trying to tell you, the reader, that you are at least one of these types, maybe 2, but usually there's one that stands out. And one of the types is the natural, which is the person who's retained their childlike qualities.
This makes sense.
But in all of them, if the seducer seems too calculating, too cold, too in control, too trying to dominate and get sex or get a favor out of it, it's sometimes easy to see through, and it's not very seductive. But we don't think of children as being seducers. We just think of them being themselves. But actually, children are trying to seduce. They actually are trying to get your attention. They are trying to get your love. But if you make it seem like you're just a natural, like you're just naturally who you are, then people won't realize that you're seducing them. You can get away with a lot. Whereas if you're so cold and calculating, and it's so clear you're making moves, so clear you read Robert's book and you're following this, idea and that one, then people can see through it. I remember in the early 2000s, the whole pickup artist thing was sort of taking off. And they had all of these strategies that they would use, like negging and things like that. And they reached a point where I would talk to women and they say, I've seen that strategy used on me so many times that I could see it coming from miles away. It completely lost its effect because it was so clear, it was so obvious. So the whole game of seduction is to make it seem like you're not seducing. And having that kind of childlike quality will conceal all of your strategies, all of the tactics that you're using. And maybe you're not even using a conscious strategy. You are just being who you are, which is ultimately the most charming quality of all. It's hard to there's no algorithm that can determine what's more evil in these situations. So it's subjective. But one of the ugliest emotions is envy, simply because people don't recognize it. They don't admit to themselves that they're feeling envy. And because they don't admit to themselves that they feel envy, they feel they have license to do whatever they want. So a lot of murders, a lot of terrible crimes, a lot of sabotage have been committed out of envy of the person that you're dealing with. But you never admit it to yourself, because envy means that you feel inferior to someone else. You wish you had what they have. Humans don't like to admit that they're inferior, that somebody has something that they wish they had. So we justify it to ourselves. We say, they're really a bad person. They're evil. They're inconsiderate. They're all full of themselves. They're arrogant. It's actually stemming from us. It's stemming from the fact that we wish we had what they had. We feel envy. And because we justify it as it's their problem, we're now justified to commit terrible things to them, spying on them, hurting them, sabotaging them. I have stories in The Laws of Human Nature of the great Mary Shelley, the woman who wrote Frankenstein, and how she was a magnet for envy. Some people are magnets for envy, and they're magnets from envy because they're so good. They're so successful. They're smart. They're beautiful. They're witty. They've got all these good qualities. A lot of people hate them and envy them. And she brought this woman into her life who was so friendly and nice. And that's what envious people often do. They often ingratiate themselves so that they can hurt you. And this woman ended up stealing her husband from her, who was the famous poet, Shelley. He ended up dying in an accident. She basically ruined Mary Shelley's life, destroyed it through envy, right? And finally, it took a long time because Mary Shelley didn't want to acknowledge this, but finally she realized that this woman is evil, downright evil, right? So envy can turn into a very evil, destructive emotion. It's not always that. There's passive envy where I myself feel envy for a great basketball player who could do things that I could never do, because I love basketball. I was never very good at it, but God damn it, I really envy Kobe Bryant. But I don't do anything about it. I love him. He was my hero. But so there's passive envy where you kind of envy. I've talked about this before, but Ryan Holiday, I was once his mentor, and now he's incredibly successful. He's younger than me. He's better looking than me. I could feel envy towards him, and I do, and I admit it. But it's passive envy. I don't act on it. But people who are very insecure and feel envy are capable of very evil things. The other emotion that can lead to evil actions are people who are so certain of themselves. They know the truth. They know what is going on. They know the answer to everything. Because they know what is happening, they're willing to do anything, right? They'll take all kinds of actions to prove that they're certain. But their certainty is not based on anything real. So I always look at people who are filled with conviction and certainty as actually very dark figures. The warm human quality that you want is you don't know. You're uncertain. You're not sure this is exactly the right thing to do. You're not killed by doubt. You're not able to not take any action. But you always have a sense of, maybe I don't know what's right. Maybe I have to think more deeply about it. Maybe I have to be more of a human being than this machine that's so certain about things. But those would be to be the two most potentially evil qualities. There's good things about getting older. I don't take things quite so seriously anymore. I feel calmer about life. And I personally have a sense of fulfillment and security that I didn't have when I was younger. So nothing is better or worse. It's just life. And so it has its advantages. But time does pass more quickly. And I don't have the energy that I had when I was younger. Things that I miss terribly. And, it's kind of sad, but, I had such a good time when I was younger, and I kind of miss that. It's gone forever. But other things have taken its place. But time definitely passes more quickly when you're older, yeah.
I mean, I've noticed that even at 23 years old, I'm like, wow, this last year feels a lot faster than it did in middle school. And I'm like, it's just going to get faster and faster as it goes.
When you're a kid, the way I explain it, because I do a lot of meditation and I think about these things a lot, is that when you're a child, because a day could feel like a year, so many things happen. I don't know if this is going to sound weird, but the space in between your thoughts can be rather large. So you have a thought, and then like a minute later, you'll have another thought. And in between that, time passes really slowly. When you get older, the thoughts come quicker and quicker and quicker. Now it's not like a whole minute. Now it's like less than a second. One new thought, another image, another memory, blah, 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 really spinning faster and faster and faster. As that goes through your mind, time seems to speed up. You don't have those vistas of time that are kind of empty and open, which gives that kind of slow rhythm to life. You've got this sped up, continual thinking going on, half of a second, new images, new memories, new problems. I think that's why time speeds up. That's just my theory.